Welcome to another episode of the Sure Tech Podcast, InfoSec with the Three Hacketeers. I am here with Josh and Jose today. I personally am in Florida with my wife at a conference for her her professional life, and I know Josh and Jose are back home. So if you hear some noise on my end, please excuse that.
It's that pool party you hang out at.
Well, I'm the only one at the pool party right now. So let's get into it. So we're here to talk about an enclave and when it is ideal for your organization to implement what is called an enclave. One of the biggest keywords and hot word topics in the CMMC world is a CUI enclave. But the idea of an enclave can stretch to pretty much every single compliance requirement. When is it ideal to actually enclave necessary data away from the rest of your company and the rest of your network? So Josh, do you want to add anything into the intro before we jump into what exactly is an enclave?
No, only that I'm jealous of you and your unlimited mimosas.
I don't have unlimited mimosas.
I'll curb my jealousy then.
Yeah, you can curb your jealousy. So let's get into it here. Josh, go ahead. Let's talk about it. What exactly is an enclave?
So an enclave is when you take your whole organization and you break off a piece of it, a subset of your organization, and you apply specific rules to only that part of the organization. And then the rest of your organization runs, as it was.
So it's basically like taking like a box and then another, and we have various stuff in this box. When we want to put extra protections on a single piece that's inside this box or multiple pieces inside the box, so we protect that extra within the box. Is that a good physical representation of what you just said?
Yeah, I think so. Or you have the root of the word, the old cities. In the Middle Ages, they put an enclave in the city. It'd be a walled off area. They'd wall off part of the city. And then everybody who was part of some group, merchants or, foreigners, would live in that walled off section from, secure from like everybody else. So that's this idea. You're taking CUI, whatever sensitive data you have to apply stricter controls to, and you're walling it off from the rest of your organization.
I like that word, just the sensitive stuff, the sensitive data that we need to wall off from the rest of the organization. With that being said, what is the security difference? Because before we delve into specific compliance requirements and the benefits of this, what is the difference between an enclave and just saying, hey, this server contains sensitive information, let's just put it on a different subnet?
Right. So on the surface, it doesn't look like a lot of a difference because your enclave is obviously going to be on a subnet. That's going to be part of it. The difference is the actual security controls that you put in place are different between the enclave and not in the enclave. Whereas a subnet, all your security controls might be the same. You might have the same password policies, the same user policies, same acceptable use of technology policies. People are allowed to, for example, you can use USB drives, right? Maybe your organization, you're like, yeah, you can use USB drives. But if you're in the enclave, you might say, hey, no USB drives, right? So the rules are different. Whereas a subnet is just a subnet.
Got it. So just to reiterate, that the enclave, not only is it subnetted away or just on a completely different network, it also has different rules around how it is, like the policies to be utilized inside of this specific enclave, correct?
Correct.
Got it. Awesome. So with that being said, what I know that we've talked about sensitive information, and specifically, what kinds of information could we be talking about? I know one example is within CMMC, we talk about CUI, right? And we can talk about HIPAA and HIPAA specific information. Why are these compliance requirements from HIPAA, from CMMC, PCI? Why are they requiring enclaves?
Well, to be clear, they're not requiring enclaves. They require very specific security controls that some organizations find difficult to apply to the entire organization. That's really, when you're looking at the enclave, and as you said, this is a hot topic in particularly the CMMC with the controlled unclassified information sphere. People look at these controls, NIST 110, CMMC level 2. The NIST 110 controls, excuse me. And they go, I can't make everybody do this. I can't make Bob from accounting 2FA into his laptop every time he logs in. Like he'll have a stroke. But you have to have, MFA for your CUI. So you enclave your organization. You set aside the CUI. So it works really well in organizations that have a small amount of sensitive information. So sticking with the CUI example, you're a government contractor. Let's say you're a builder, like you're an architect firm, right? You build lots of buildings, and you build some buildings for the government. And the government says, we don't want these, plans, building designs to be, exposed. You got to keep them secret. So you either have to keep your entire organization's building plans to this very strict rule, or you say, hey, only 10% of my contracts are with the government. I'm going to make a special, section of data storage and access rules that are to this more strict requirement. You see it a lot in payment card industry is the other place where if you have a store and you've got, for whatever reason, you've got some like office workers in the back, and then you have some front facing where you accept credit cards, and you've purchased, an off the shelf credit card reader. People come in, customers buy things from you, or they get a service from you. They pay you with a credit card. They put their credit card to the machine. It takes their money. They leave. And now you have to do all this, PCI compliance. An easy way to keep it simple is to have those machines not be able to communicate with the people in your office in the back, because they have no reason to access any of the data on those machines. So you separate it and you make your life easy. Where it doesn't make sense, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, where it doesn't make sense is if a large amount of your company is the sensitive data. So if you are a small healthcare company and you're trying to protect your patient's health information, and everyone in your company is on the same network and they're all having to access this data to do their jobs, it doesn't make sense to make an enclave when the enclave is practically the entire company.
So it's all about scope, right? It's all about what part of our company, or is it our entire company? Is it and how big is that part of the company? Who all needs to be accessing the sensitive information? What computers need to be accessing the sensitive information? And do we need to just require the entire organization to be meeting the necessary compliance requirements? Or do we just need to enclave away a specific subset of the computers and people in our organization so that the scope of these strict requirements or stricter requirements only apply to this specific enclave? Is that an overall decent summary?
That's a decent summary. It's all about, ideally you're doing scope reduction. Was working with a guy, again, this was CUI. They only had 4 people in a 20-person company that worked on CUI. So 16 people in the company, they didn't want to have to deal with all of the security requirements. That's a lot of management requirements, right? Like, how the firewall is configured, how do you do change management, how do you organize your whole IT, risk assessments, security, vulnerability scanning. And they're like, I don't want to pay for this for my entire company. It's like, okay, well, you got to separate those 4 people then and do everything for them, and then do what's best for the other 16 people. And those 16 people who aren't in the enclave, they better not be able to touch the enclave. Like, you basically split your organization into 2.
And then from the other balancing act, though, right, is to actually implement the enclave. How much does it cost? Is the cost benefit analysis needs to be performed, right? Does it make more sense to create an enclave that meets the necessary, CMMC requirements, HIPAA requirements, etc.? Does it make more sense to do that for these 4 people and create the enclave, or does it just make sense to require the entire company to meet the necessary compliance requirements, from a cost analysis perspective, right?
Exactly. 100%. And maybe in a non-compliance framework, if you have a company and you're working on several projects, right? And one of those projects is very valuable to your company, contains a lot of intellectual property, maybe has some information sharing with third parties that they want the information secured, and you've got like a fairly large company. You're going to put stricter rules on that project. You're going to make sure that only people who are working on that project can access it. That, when your IT team's working on things, they're not going to accidentally leak data on this sensitive project into the broader part of the organization where people who don't need to muck with it are going to muck with it, right? That's beginning to look like an enclave. And depending on how you implement it, it might be an enclave. Might just be an organizational unit, or it could be an enclave. But you really do have to look at your whole company and say, does it make sense to make everyone follow the same rules? And there can be some very strict rules on account share, shared accounts, which a lot of times administrators will have shared accounts that multiple people can log into for administration purposes. Specific technologies that have to get used, CMMC, federal stuff is big on the FIPS standard for encryption. That costs money. It costs a lot of money in some cases. And then, strict access control for anything, any kind of sensitive information always has to have strict access control. Strict planning, requirements, change management approvals where there's actually a formal process before anybody can touch anything. It can be a lot of overhead. So if you can reduce the amount of your company that's subject to this, you can reduce your cost. You can simplify things. Sometimes it's not simpler. Sometimes it's simpler to just put the entire company under one of these frameworks and say everything that we do in this entire company is going to meet this framework. So it's not a panacea. It's not going to fix everything. It's not the right choice for everybody. But generally, those who it's the right choice for have really enjoyed it. They've really seen benefits out of it. And there are cost-saving benefits to, particularly when you're talking about expensive hardware or specific software licensing requirements, and you can reduce the scope of those licenses, the number of licenses you have to purchase, the number of hardware units you have to purchase. You're going to spend less money.
Hey everyone, this is Sid from my home studio. We had an issue with our recording software, so I am finishing the episode here at home. So to conclude, we wanted to leave everybody with a message. As you go through and you move forward with building an enclave for whatever reason that your business needs an enclave, we highly recommend that you do go out and get a second set of eyes or a third set of eyes to make sure that whatever you're building, number one, you know what the new workflow is going to look like. Number two, your T's are crossed, your I's are dotted, and everything is good to go and in place from the information security perspective, from the IT perspective, from all angles, right? When you get more people involved to assess and ask questions, things are just done better, plain and simple. We do it all the time within our own company. We double and triple check our own work. And number 3, whatever compliance that you might be going for, again, you'll be double and triple checking that you are doing everything that you need to do to be compliant. And we're not a podcast, and I really don't think we're a podcast that sits here and sells our own services, right? But I think that we would be remiss to not tell you that if you're going to go and build an enclave, please do not just do it on your own. If you have somebody else doing it, please don't let them be the only ones doing it, because it's just going to be best for your company. Whenever the transition happens, everybody at the company will know what to expect, what to expect from the new workflow changes. And again, when you're going for whatever compliance you might be going for, it'll be double and triple checked, and you will be much more confident when applying for the actual compliance stamp of approval. So that's how we wanted to conclude the podcast, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the SureTech Podcast, The Three Hacketeers. If you found value in what you listened to today, please give us a like. Do follow us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. In the description, there will be a link tree that will take you to our social media pages, and you can keep up with us on your favorite social media platform. If you'd like to get in touch with us here at SureTech, please email us at info@sure-technologies.com, which is also in the description. Thanks again, and see you on the next one.